Hello, friends. This is Mark from the Human-Cetacean Alliance. I want to talk about a conversation I had a few days ago with a client of mine during one of my dolphin coaching sessions. My client asked me whether I was aware of a conversation that is doing the rounds at the moment on the internet, which is about an asteroid, or let's just say a celestial object that is heading towards the Earth, apparently, or so the story goes. And I wasn't aware that this was such a big deal on social media and on forums at the moment. But my client told me that many people were actually quite scared and even desperate because they were actually convinced that this was going to be the end of the world. And they were saying so. And what I told my client, I shared a piece of information with him about the first director of NASA. His name was Werner von Braun, and as his name indicates, he was German. He was not only German, but he was the man who invented the V1 and V2 rockets during World War II, which were used by the Nazi regime as one of their so-called wonder weapons, the Wunderwaffen. This was the later stage of the war. So these were the first missiles, basically, that were able to hit long distance. And so he was actually the number one rocket scientist in the world. So it would make sense from a US government perspective to have the number one rocket scientist on your side, right? Except the man was a Nazi. And of course, the narrative was, well, he wasn't such a bad Nazi, everyone who was in positions of authority, if you wanted to get high enough in the hierarchy, you had to be a member of the Nazi party. And anyway, after the war, we put him through the process of denazification, as if there was a sort of decontamination process of some kind that they were able to cleanse people's minds with from undesirable ideology. This was actually not true at all. Werner von Braun had been a very enthusiastic Nazi. And there was a much larger context to this, which was that many Nazi, not only scientists, but also intelligence agents and security officers were brought into the United States, or let's say employed by NATO after World War II in the framework of something called Operation Paperclip. And that Operation Paperclip, its goal was to grab as many Nazi assets as possible and integrate them in the US government machinery and more broadly in the later, once NATO had been founded, in the NATO machinery. Some might call that an assimilation, a repurposing of these Nazi assets. Others see it as an infiltration. And I definitely see it as an infiltration that was actually very successful. But by the way, isn't it interesting that the first director of NASA was a former Nazi? I find that the similarity in sonority is very interesting here. It's almost as if someone is laughing at you he's making fun of you, and he's and that some people are saying between themselves, they're not even seeing it. They're so stupid. They're not even seeing it. Anyway, why am I talking about Werner von Braun in this context? Because uh, an information about him was leaked by someone who used to be in his personal assistant in the United States. And that person said that towards the end of his life, and probably because he was reaching the end of his days on the physical plane, he spilled the beans about the scenario that was going to unfold over the next few decades at a global level, at a worldwide level. And of course, that man, because of who he was and where he was coming from and the position he was occupying, he knew a lot. He knew a lot of secret information. So what he shared with his personal assistant was that there was going to be a consolidation of power on the world stage. So power was going to get concentrated into fewer and fewer hands, fewer and fewer institutions, the end goal being the advent of a world government. And it will all be done by the engineering of fake threats, engineering the perception of imaginary threats. Now, when I say imaginary, it doesn't mean that these things don't necessarily exist. It means that they are being staged. They are being deliberately staged in order to provide impetus, in order to provide pretexts to further that consolidation of power. And the first stage in that scenario, he told her, was actually ongoing at the time. It was going on, it was the Cold War. It was the perceived threat of a communist takeover of the world under Soviet leadership. And of course, the same fears were nurtured on the other side of the Iron Curtain, especially in the Soviet Union, that the West was up to no good and was trying to destroy the Soviet Union. So that the effect that the people behind these scenarios that conspiracy theorists would call, for instance, among other things, the cabal, meaning the small group of people pulling the strings of human society behind the scenes, the effect that was pursued was that because there is a perceived threat, there is a sort of circling the wagons effect, and big alliances are being formed and big institutions are being created in which countries, various countries, are putting their resources in. So what we have done is supranational institutions and organizations like NATO, like the Warsaw Pact, like the European Union, like the World Health Organization, etc., etc. So because in order to deter your very threatening opponent, you cannot do it alone, you have to create a big alliance. So you consolidate. And Werner von Braun said that this was not going to go on forever. But after the Cold War, the next scenario to unfold, the next threat that would be put forward would be terrorism. And there would be a global war on terror. And in order to do that, again, there would have to be cooperation on a large scale between many countries and sharing of resources, military resources, intel resources, and also there was going to be um, a curtailment of freedoms, as we saw with the so-called Patriot Act, for instance, in the aftermath of 9/11. So after that would be front and center, the big threat of terrorism that was largely organized and funded and empowered not by the people who were designated as the actual terrorists, but by other actors like intelligence agencies. And many people have claimed that, for instance, the whole Islamic movement across the world, Islamic organizations are mostly, to a very, very large extent, controlled by the British Empire and the MI6, the primary intelligence agency of the British Empire. So after the war on terror, there would be global warming. And of course, global warming already started, the first effort to promote the big climate scare started before the war on terror was full steam, because it's not, that calendar is not linear. It's just that maximum focus is being directed on one theme after the other after the other. One theme is being put front and center, and all the projectors are being directed on that theme. So after the war on terror, after the big climate scare, there would be, and I don't remember the exact order here, but there would be, I'm blanking, there would be an asteroid. There would be a big, big asteroid scare. An asteroid was going to hit the planet. There would be a pandemic. There would be a global pandemic. And COVID-19 was not the first attempt. It was the most severe, but there had been other attempts before that had failed. And COVID-19 also, despite appearances, failed to a large extent, but I'm not going to go into detail into that right now. So, pandemic, asteroid, and the very final stage, the very final episodes, the very final scare would be the fake alien invasion. Now, that, in my opinion, that is not going to happen. I believe the time window for that fake alien invasion to be staged in an effective way has passed, even though some are still, I believe, hoping that they could pull that off, that they could actually be able to to stage that with the resources they have at their disposal. Secret space programs, Project Bluebeam, holographic imagery. Again, I'm not going to analyze that in detail. If you want to research it, type Project Bluebeam, Project Bluebeam. Anyway, Asteroid was going to be one of the late episodes in the unfolding of that very interesting fictitious scenario, because that asteroid was going to be presented as such a terrible threat to life on Earth that all governments were going to have to cooperate in order to neutralize it. They were going to have to, again, put their resources together, their human and material and financial resources together. Now, again, I really believe that the time for that to be implemented, the time of the asteroid scenario, the time for that one to be implemented in an efficient and successful way has long passed. They cannot do it anymore. But what we are seeing at the moment is that there is such a loss of control from the cabal, and you might argue with me that you're not seeing that, you're not seeing real signs of that, but there are many, actually. There is such a loss of control and, in a way, such a desperation that they're grasping at straws, and they are trying to put new life into these old, decayed zombie scenarios to see if they might have any chance to finally have success with them in progressing towards the achievement of their goals. Now, I believe this is actually what is behind the scare that is going on about that celestial object. Something important to realize also is that fear is a powerful energy. Fear is a powerful emotional energy that can be harvested. Any energy can be harvested if you know how to do that, if you have the knowledge and the resources to do that. And it can be harvested to power certain systems, certain infrastructures of control. It can also be used to feed some beings. I don't want to scare anyone here, but everyone feeds in a certain way. That's not entirely true, actually, because there are many beings in this universe who don't have to feed because they produce their own sustenance. They are connected with their, let's say, their divine essence so much that they actually generate their own sustenance, so they don't have to feed on anything. But if you are in a state of being where you have to feed on something, there are many different energies that people feed on. When we eat solid food, it's another form of energy, you know. We convert the solid food into energy that our bodies can use. And so there are beings entities that feed upon fear. They're not very nice, obviously. They're not particularly nice beings because it's a really low frequency energy. So I'm saying that because we really should be careful about the type of emotional energy that we are broadcasting, that we are beaming into the world. Because that one doesn't work in our favor, definitely not. So some people claim that fear can be seen as an acronym for false evidence appearing real. And I believe that's something to keep in mind as well when certain forces try to scare us by influencing our perception of certain situations and certain events. Now, of course, these big fear-mongering, these big scare operations on a massive scale require a lot of preparation, a lot of coordination and effort on a massive scale as well. And when it comes to preparation, one of the primary tools that are being used in order to work on people's psyche and their subconscious is the movie industry. It is cinema. And of course, Hollywood is the primary actor, the primary pawn that is being used in that regard. And of course, for that reason, there was a movie that was released in 98 that was a Hollywood blockbuster called Armageddon. And the subject of the movie was an asteroid that was on a collision course with the Earth and that had the potential to wipe out every life on Earth. And so an all-American hero was tasked with destroying the asteroid. So that is very common. That is very common. Fiction and especially movies because they enter the subconscious directly. There is no filter that the conscious erects, so to speak, between itself and the subconscious. So the images they go right into the reptilian brain, and what is released via movies, it's not just in order to manipulate people and prepare them. It's also to make a sort of formal disclosure. This is what we are going to do. Do you accept our offer or do you decline it? Do you refuse it? It's very devious, of course, because it's not really transparency. It's not real disclosure. It's just a sort of full trick that these people do so that they can justify that they have been honest with their terms, and that if people don't explicitly refuse, then it means that they tacitly accept. It's totally messed up, of course. It's a completely messed up kind of system and mindset. Also, a very interesting point is that we know that an asteroid is actually what caused the end of the dinosaur era. They were wiped out by such a catastrophe, by the impact of an asteroid. So the fact is, this kind of event gets recorded. It gets recorded in the memory of the planet. And we are connected subconsciously to the memory of the planet. And in a way that's perhaps even more fascinating, several sources have claimed that our collective soul, our group soul, was once embodied as dinosaurs, meaning that in the past, in a way, you could say that we were the dinosaurs on this planet. And in fact, I know personally someone who got memories of that not very long ago. My friend George Kavasilas was camping in the old growth forest, very ancient forest of Australia. And he was having time away from all electronics. And all of a sudden, he was flooded with very intense memories of that era of dinosaurs. And what he said is that it wasn't really what we think it was. And the strongest impression he got was that we had so much fun. We had so much fun being dinosaurs. And he also felt a sadness because that era was nearing its end. And as a collective, we somehow knew that. We somehow knew that it was about to end. And so that's another fascinating piece of information, is that these very ancient memories and very ancient traumas and wounds can be used and weaponized against us. Anyway, fear, we need to manage our fears. We need to uncover them, we need to understand them and manage them. And ideally transmute them. Because if we don't, as evidenced here, someone is going to use them against us. So that's one of the aspects, of course, of my work in dolphin coaching and in my other type of one-on-one consultations that is called exploring your depth. This is something that we do in a way that is very efficient and powerful. Now, that's all I have to say about this subject for the moment. So I'm going to leave you here. And if you want to hear about my activities, if you want to learn to get information about my activities, my coaching sessions, my online course, and my retreat in Madeira, the next one is going to happen in the beginning of November. It's a whale watching and swimming with dolphins retreat. You can go to my website, which is mentioned in the description of this video, cetaceanalliance.earth. So I salute you, I wish you all the best, and see you soon for another video.